We are continuing our legal analysis of the Murdaugh murder trial today with our legal expert, Carl B. Grant, a trial lawyer who has a lot of experience even trying murder cases of his own, joining us today to really talk about what was an eventful day as the first witness took the stand, and it's still happening as we speak, Judy.
It is indeed. It's been a fascinating day in the courtroom.
Yes, absolutely. So, Carl, really wanted to set the lay of the land today. Prosecution is their case. They bring up their first witness, who is the guy who was the first to respond to the scene, to the murder scene. What was your takeaway? Did they have a strong case today?
Well, the building blocks of the case have already begun. The physical evidence are the building blocks of the case. And the question becomes, how many building blocks do you really have? That's the real question. And the cross-examination normally goes a little bit like this. All right? You say you have A, B, C, and on down the line. But the question becomes, how many do you not have? So the line of questioning goes, could you have done fingerprints? Yes. You chose not to. Am I correct? Yes. So the jury doesn't have fingerprints because you chose not to get them. Do you have this? No, I do not. In other words, item by item, you make the jury find out and understand that they don't have everything that they need because the prosecution and the investigators consciously chose not to obtain them.
Well, and you know what? Dick Harpootlian did employ that strategy today. The first witness on the stand, who Billy mentioned, Sergeant Daniel Green, he pushed back on some of that, saying, you know, when Dick Harpootlian was asking him, did you do X, did you do Y, did you do Z? And some of that, he said, well, that's not my job. When I go to the scene, I'm not the investigator. I secure the scene. I make sure that the scene is safe and then identify any obvious evidence. So it'll be interesting to see how the jury weighs those considerations. There was some compelling audio that we listened to in court today.
Yes.
One of them was Alex Murdaugh's initial response, his immediate and initial response to Corporal Green, or Sergeant Green, I should say, on scene. So let's take a listen to that, and then we'll talk on the other side. Okay. It was about a boat crash. Take a listen.
My son was in a boat wreck a few months back. He's been getting threats. Most of it's been benign stuff we didn't take serious. Okay. You know, he's been getting punched. I know that's what it is.
Okay. When did?
So, as the prosecuting attorney was talking with the sergeant about this, he said, "Did you ask him anything about this boat crash?" And he said, "No. This was a completely unsolicited response." So, what are they going for there with the jury?
Well, what they're trying to go for is, did he at that very moment try to manufacture his defense? That's what we're trying to go to is, was this created in his mind to establish that, oh, this could relate to the boat crash? And then, of course, one of the questions obviously would be, well, you said that he was punched, and you said you didn't take the threats seriously, and they were all benign. At any time did anybody call to say that they were going to kill your son? So how seriously were the threats? How do they go from benign to a punch to this tragic event? So I'm sure they'll be focusing on that.
And we also heard Sergeant Green testify to how Murdaugh was acting, his condition. That caused a lot of conversation, and a lot of people online were asking, you know, the importance of that. I want to play that for our viewers, where you hear Sergeant Green describing what Alex Murdaugh was doing while he was on the scene. Take a listen.
What is Mr. Murdaugh doing at this particular time?
He's on the phone, pacing around, talking to someone. I'm not sure who he was talking to at that point.
Did he ask you to confirm if they were dead?
He did. He asked multiple times while I was on scene.
Did you ever see him any tears, any physical tears?
I did not.
Carl, why was this important for the prosecution to highlight what Alex Murdaugh was doing at that time, his condition, and if there were any tears at that very moment?
Because obviously this is a very traumatic event. I mean, this human emotions for a person to witness the tragic slaughtered bodies, using the word, butchered bodies, using the word of the defense counsel, of their wife and their son. There's certain common sense emotions that come about. Not everybody cries, for sure, but at the same time, anyone who sees that is expected to cry. So you would normally go with what normally happens. Again, it goes back to common sense. What would you normally expect a person to act like if you or saw that happen to one of your family members? So that's what they're getting to.
His demeanor obviously is going to be a big question, and something that the jury will have to evaluate, because as they talk about his emotional state as he was standing there. There's also the contradiction because, as we just heard in that audio, he was clear in that moment that his wife and son were dead when he talked to the 911 operator, but yet he asked the sergeant to check on him as if he was confused about it in some way. That's a discrepancy.
Yeah. It is. That's a logical inconsistency. Of course, there's a lot going on with this man at that time. I'm sure the defense will try to explain all of that. But that definitely is a logical inconsistency, and you hear that in the statements being made in the 911 calls. So again, good trial lawyers will figure out how to use that to their benefit.
All right.
And we also talk about the demeanor. I know we got to take a quick break. I want to get this one more soundbite in there because it was very interesting. One moment he's talking to Sergeant Green, giving information about his wife, about his son. And then we now know it was one of the other officers who arrived on scene, the K-9 officer, handler with his officer. And he just says, hey, how you doing? Yeah. And they talked about that demeanor. So I want to play that quickly, and then we'll take a quick break after we talk with Carl about that reaction as well.
Maggie Murdaugh. Margaret Brandstetter Murdaugh. How you doing?
What's their birthday?
Pause it right there. What did the defendant just say? Let me back it up.
Margaret Brandstetter Murdaugh. How you doing?
What did the defendant say right there?
So while I'm in the process of gathering information about the two victims from Mr. Murdaugh, somebody walks by behind me, and he pauses what he's telling me to say, hey, how you doing?
How you doing?
Yeah.
And who was that he said that to?
I'm not 100% certain. I believe it was a fire rescue individual.
So listen, I'm not going to second guess somebody's reaction after they see, you know, a horrific death of their wife and their son. But also, that's just not a good look.
That's, again, something that the prosecution is going to say, who goes into a casual, how you doing, at that moment, at that time, and at that place, consider what just happened. So again, I'm sure we'll hear that in closing argument, but I'm sure the defense will have some logical argument to counter that as best they can.
Wow.
Yeah. All right, we're going to pause right there, and after the break, continuing our conversation with our legal analyst, Carl B. Grant. Stay tuned.